Hello, Night Nation. I'm Trylko from the Sons of UCF, joined by Eric Lopez of the Black and Gold Banneret. Welcome to Around the Kingdom. Elo, hello, and welcome back.
Welcome. Good to be back, Trace. Coming up on this edition of the fastest UCF show around, as a culture change taking place as we speak at UCF football. We'll break that down. What did Trace see in the open practice? Plus, UCF did not get the crown at the crown, but did they win something more important? And then there's baseball. We'll try to discuss that, maybe, and much more coming up on this edition of Around the Kingdom.
It was so emotional when you talked about a little bit more for basketball than thought baseball. All right, before we get going with all of that, Elo, let us welcome in the third member of our team. He is Adam Eaton from the Sons of UCF, keeps an eye on the clock, keeps us on our toes. Adam, hello.
Gentlemen, good evening. I'm a little down today. I mean, basketball's over, football's over. I'm going to need somebody in UCF land to play in the Masters, so I have something to talk about.
Well, that you may have to hold your breath for. Thank you, Adam. You mentioned it, Elo. The word culture, it's been bandied about a lot since Scott Frost returned to UCF. And a quote from his post open practice availability on Saturday that I wanted to read. Do you get your reaction? I think the culture, he says, needed some cultivation. I don't think it was there. And we're going to do our best to try to keep building it. A little bit of a slam on Gus Malzahn and staff, don't you think?
Sounds like deja vu all over again, doesn't it, Trace? Wasn't that kind of the similar talk back in the fall of 2016, and where Scott took over for a winless team, and they were looking for a culture change? And
he wasn't wrong, though.
And
right?
He wasn't, and he may not be wrong again here, although it's always interesting that this always comes up when after a losing season. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm not surprised by that. I mean, when you go 4-8, things went wrong, Trace. So, yeah, I could definitely see that. When you have players leaving during the season, perhaps was a sign of what Scott Frost is alluding to, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and, it's spring camp. It's early. I was asked today, are you buying into all of this? And I said, yeah, nothing's happened yet, right? It's practice. And we'll see what happens when games are played and maybe some losses pile up, and that will really test culture. But he is saying the right things, and you do need that culture to be bound. And I don't know how successful he can be this time around. It's not like you have guys for 2, 3, 4 seasons, right? It's a whole new crop of guys that a lot of them, heck, when the portal opens, may not be here, much less a season away. So he's got his work cut out for him, but you do hear from players that they appreciate that culture being built at UCF.
Makes you wonder, too, what would Gus's reaction be to it? Because we won't know because, he closes everything to the media, hasn't learned a thing. Good luck, Mike Norvell. Hope you've got those, your resume really updated there, because you might need to update it pretty soon at the end of the year. You were in Tallahassee. How embarrassing is it that Gus still believes that closing everything, practicing everything will help you win games? I don't think he learned anything from UCF, which from the outside. Do you agree with that? Do you think he's learned anything from the UCF experience?
What? It's not Mike Norvell's decision up in Tallahassee. You think this is Gus Malzahn's influence? No, he is stuck in his ways, and
I will say this: would you not agree? At least from that standpoint, it is very refreshing now at UCF. Very refreshing.
Yeah, I think that's the right word. It has been more open, and it's been, I think, a fun spring.
Well, you know what's open is the quarterback battle, of course. Hey, Trace, you know what's around the corner? It's the transfer portal. As all 4 quarterbacks taking reps right now have done some pretty good things. Hard to get a read because there's nobody saying anything or mentioning any names there. What's your thoughts right now on the quarterback situation with the portal, spring portal, just around the corner?
Well, I tried to read in a little bit to Scott Frost's statement about no one really taking this job and owning it. And he and the other coaches not really mentioning a lot of other players, because I think that what you just said there, that key word, the portal, right? It looms, it opens again, and they don't want to lose guys. However, Elo, I'm not sure that anyone has taken control of the job. And I think for UCF, that's probably a good thing that there is a battle that will continue into preseason camp in the fall.
You really think nobody is in the lead right now at quarterback based on what you saw in practice there, perhaps any of the scuttle?
Limited what we saw. Some guys performed less than they would have hoped. Some interceptions there. And I think we read in a little bit too much after the Gus experience with KJ Jefferson that the transfer quarterback is the guy that's going to be at the top of the heap. I do think that they're all going to get a fair shake from Scott Frost, Steve Cooper, and crew, Mackenzie Milton included in that. And I feel a little bit better about that outcome than I did a season ago.
I'm going to tell you right now who I think the quarterback's going to be. It's Jackson. I think it's going to be him. I think he's going to start the meaningful games. I think you're
because he's the best.
He probably has the most upside. And I think
I'm just saying that I think that they're going to give the job to who earns it, and it's not going to necessarily be all based on the NIL situation, is what I would argue there.
I agree, but then you have games like Jacksonville State and A&T where you can play multiple quarterbacks. So you may not need to know who exactly your starter is until North Carolina. So you're not going on record of naming a quarterback right now. You don't have a prediction. I'm not
doing
hide.
Nah. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. I've gotten burned too much I believe in this offensive line only to see the offensive line let me down. And I'm not doing that. I'm not overhyping anything. And I think I've bought into that Scott Frost temper expectations mode. I'm just watching it unfold like everyone else. I'm not going to hype up anyone, Elo. We talk NIL dollars. House settlement back in the news with a court hearing on Monday. U.S. District Judge hearing from lawyers in the final approval hearing. And what's interesting about this is it could raise the revenue sharing to $20.5 million for athletes this summer. UCF promises to get to that. Also, I know you're interested in this because of the impact on softball, other sports, increase in scholarships. Still some details to be worked out, but everyone thinks it's on a glide path there. What do you think? How does it change things?
Well, I think you're going to see a lot of athletic departments change. I think a lot of, as we saw in St. Francis recently announced, they're going to go from D1 to D3. That's a basketball, school. It's not like they don't even have football in fact. I just don't think everybody, there's like over 300 Division I programs in basketball and all that. I think that number is coming down because I think the cost will be too much. I don't think that impacts UCF as much as hopefully it does help them in some of the Olympic sports from, getting free rides or scholarships. So certainly it ain't going to be revenue, but here's the reality, Trace. Let me ask you this question. Do you really believe Alabama football, for example, just because they're capped at $20.5 million, that means, guys, we can't spend any more on football? Sorry. No, they're going to keep spending however many ways around 20.5. I think they'll spend more than that. So I think it's kind of like the Dodgers. I think the power schools will be like the Dodgers in Major League Baseball. They'll just come up with loopholes around the cap and spend billions of dollars and defer it or whatever. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but you get my point.
There's still going to be bags of cash. Is that what you're predicting?
Yes.
There's still going to be money sloshing around. I do think it could lead to greater parity. So that I think would be interesting.
I do agree with that. I agree with that.
Some of the arguments that being made as part of this case is that you're subjecting future athletes to a cap determined now. So there's still some work to be done, but it still looks like it will be approved.
Anytime politicians are involved, it's still a lot of work to be done and just a lot of head shaking. Anyway, hey, UCF basketball, just like we always dreamed, Trace. UCF playing on Final Four weekend. Now, granted, it wasn't.
They were one of the final teams standing in
April.
Country,
in April, that's correct.
in April,
in April, that's the goal. The week you want to be playing basketball the week before the Masters. That's always the goal, and UCF accomplished that and had a double-digit lead over Nebraska in the Crown Final. Unfortunately, Nebraska came on late in that ball game. That was the theme, and win the inaugural Crown Championship, 77-66. Trace, what's your thoughts on this championship game there overall?
I think it was fine. We get asked a question in Sons of UCF Live's mailbag about whether a run in the Crown is better than a one and done in the NCAA tournament. And we'll discuss and answer that question more during the live show. But I think it was a good run for UCF. And if not for Darius being a bit gimpy, maybe they would have pulled that out and taken the crown.
Tough, too, at the back-to-back. You had the overtime game against Villanova.
Exhausting game, right? Exciting game. Took everything out of them.
But, interesting note, some breaking news here on Around the Kingdom. I'll be writing about this on Banner Red, but you'll hear it first here on the Kingdom. UCF Nebraska, 822,000 viewers on Fox.
Good number, Elo.
That is the most watched non-NCAA tournament UCF basketball game of all time.
I think that Fox will evaluate this as a success. We can talk
Yes.
more about that on Around the Kingdom Overtime. So the season's over. UCF falls just short. Runner-ups in the crown. How does this change your perception of this season, Elo, in which the Knights had that long losing streak in conference play, finished 7-13 in league play, but do make the crown and do make a deep run? Does it change how you think about this season?
I think it just kind of proves the point that this might be the weirdest UCF basketball season, certainly in the Dawkins era, if not ever. When you consider everything was the opposite of what we're used to. This team did not play defense like we're used to seeing UCF basketball. They scored a lot of points when we're not used to seeing them doing that. They lost to some games in the middle of the season. They had a losing streak. You get some teams that are like, oh, how can you lose that game? And yet they play in this inaugural tournament in Vegas at an empty arena and find a way to play and make a run, which is a credit to Coach Dawkins. I mean, you got guys that are in the portal. You got guys and really got into buying the theory of, hey, you're playing for money, but you're playing for pride. And they did. I thought they played for pride. And I think UCF fans, while, you could snicker at it, they made the best out of it that you could possibly do of this tournament. And I think they deserve credit for that.
Lemonade's out of lemon. All right, Elo, we discussed last week. Banner for winning the crown. What about runner-ups? Do you get a banner for that?
Sure. I mean, if we could get a banner for Kali Matrix, why can't we? What's the difference? What's the difference? At least this was earned on the court. At least on that one. I'll be curious to see too. This will either grow if the tournament turns out to be a success. This thing will grow a lot. And you know whose legacy may have grown? Darius Johnson, who had a fantastic tournament, highlighted by the 42-point performance in the semifinal win against Villanova, including that three-pointer to send it to overtime. Helped some guys make some money, including this guy over here. Trace. Darius Johnson lock up his spot in the UCF Athletic Hall of Fame?
I don't think he needed the crown to do that, Elo. I think the body of work over 4 seasons, the growth season to season, and the growth over the course of this season puts him in there. It's going to be a long time, Elo, I think, unless the rules significantly change, and they certainly could in college athletics, that we see a 4-year guy like Darius Johnson, certainly in men's basketball.
I do think they needed this to push it over. I think he would have eventually gotten in, but I think this may push him to being first ballot in.
Ooh, first ballot. What's that? What's the 7 years?
7 years in. So I think now he becomes a first ballot guy because he carried this team to that. And think about this. How many UCF basketball players could say what Darius has done, which is play basically in a postseason basketball tournament every year, basically, of his career, which he's basically done that here during his time at UCF with the NITs.
Year? That's each year?
Almost every year. I think he's had 2. I'm sure Adam will work on that as we speak. We got to put him to work for
correct
something.
us, Adam.
But I'm pretty sure, but I think he's been almost every year he's been in a postseason except maybe his freshman year or sophomore. Adam will have that answer. But it's a very good resume as a result. And I think people will think positively and good things of him moving forward on that.
Well, there's one person that does not need to worry about getting that call from the athletic director mentioning that they'll be in the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. That's Keyshawn Hall, who took the big payday to go to Auburn. But, Elo, UCF played a little inspired. You mentioned it, playing for pride, right? Were they a better team without the leading scorer who, turned the ball over a lot and didn't play stellar defense?
Yeah.
Might they have been a better team?
Well, the ball movement looked better, didn't it? And it's kind of weird. You got to be careful. I mean, this is not like the big, February and Big 12 action. So I think we got to be careful. Some of these teams are not loaded, but he wasn't there. And I will say this, Trace, I think Keyshawn Hall's legacy as a UCF Knight, granted it's 1 year, takes a hit. I think to some extent he becomes a little Dylan Gabriel-esque for UCF basketball, where a guy that left and I don't think he necessarily did anything wrong, except I think teams played better without him in this tournament. He went out to Auburn. The comment about he wanted to play for the best college basketball coach, I think, was in poor taste, in my opinion. I think he is not going to be well remembered at UCF. The opposite of Darius Johnson, in my opinion, which is unfortunate because I thought he had a good year for UCF. Clearly, he did because he's making now some pretty good coin at Auburn.
Yeah, I had a good year, but we won't talk about his good year
no.
over time, will we? No.
No.
Time to bring in Adam. And a little levity, a little silliness.
I guess on the levity, but I also want to talk to you guys about Florida Football Prep, one of our new sponsors around here. They are your go-to spot for everything you need to help outfit your favorite youth or prep team. They also are your premier destination for expertly conditioned leather footballs to help your quarterback throw a better ball the first day of practice. You can find them at floridafootballprep.com. Also, check out their podcast, The Quarterback's Room, available anywhere you download your podcast. All right, this game, gentlemen, I'm going to give you a sentence, a statement, and give you two options. You must pick one of those two options. Trace, you must pick one of those two options.
Are they designed to make
Eric
me uncomfortable
Lopez,
because I want to hedge?
I am starting with you. Here's the statement. Throwing interceptions and a quasi-open scrimmage is no big deal or cause for concern?
It's a Tua thing because he does that all the time at Dolphins practice with Omar Kelly. Yeah, it is concerning, especially, you could say, well, it's a new offense, new system with new receivers. But, yeah, I mean, to me, whoever's going to be the starting quarterback on this team has to protect the football, and you can't be careless, even if it is an open practice.
No big deal.
No big deal.
No big deal. Open practice, not formal scrimmage. There's the whole body of work that which we don't see. Maybe we'll get to see a little bit more during the Friday night under the lights in the bounce house open practice, but no big deal. What coaches have watched on tape and in person over the course of the spring camp will tell them a lot more than whatever.
Interceptions tell you a lot, Trace.
Saturday.
Interceptions tell you a lot.
Yeah, no big deal.
All right, next one, Trace. I'll start with you. What is a bigger priority for the upcoming men's basketball NIL budget? Moustapha Cham or everybody else?
Moustapha. They got to go all in on him, and they got to keep him. They can't replace everybody and him. They got to keep him and figure it out.
I agree. You build around Moustapha because you're not going to be able to replace him. No matter who you end up getting in the portal will not have the upside that he does. So to me, it's him.
All right, last one, gentlemen. If we live in a world where UCF retires jerseys, who gets their jersey retired first? RJ Harvey or Darius Johnson? Elo?
Ooh.
Great question. This is why Adam's the best in the business. I'm going to say RJ Harvey because football is more. It seems to me that football is more willing to retire jerseys at UCF than basketball. And like BJ Taylor, it's not like he has his number one retired. You know what I mean? Like Taco doesn't have his jersey retired. So I'm going to say it's Harvey of the two.
I'll play contrarian. I'll say Darius because I don't know what other options you're going to ever have. So I think he may be it.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you. Elo, something new this week. You get to play around with this lead here, this intro. Little audio daily double for you.
Audio daily double. Wow, that's a good
little Jeopardy reference.
Okay, I'm glad you cleared that up because I was like, what are you doing? All right. So Darius Johnson was interviewed, and we have a clip that he talks about what can a UCF recruit or a transfer potentially coming to UCF, what can they expect? Here's what
What would you say to somebody thinking about coming to UCF and somebody thinking about playing for Coach Dawkins?
Honestly, if you come in to look at a bunch of nice facilities or you think you're about to get a whole bunch of money in IOIs,
and he goes on to tell Robert Aronoff, 2 letters, 2 words, who was in Vegas for the crown for the Sons of UCF, that Coach Dawkins will make you a better player and all of that good stuff. But it's an interesting soundbite nonetheless, Elo.
Pretty accurate, though, isn't it? You might apply that to other sports, too. It's not just basketball exclusive there. That's a pretty honest answer, and it's pretty accurate. And for all those critics, they're wondering, why is UCF not doing so great in Big 12 and this or that? You just heard it from an athlete's perspective on that. That's the challenge that UCF has moving forward as they are entering the Big 12, Trace, right? I mean, would you agree with this?
Yeah, it's what has changed, though, Elo, is I believe my perception of the importance of facilities. UCF lags behind its brethren in the Big 12 in nearly all facilities, and upgrades are being made right now to the football complex, football stadium. But we've talked about this in other sports. Upgrades need to be made. I don't think any of these student athletes care about any of that. They want to know what's in their child. Do you think Keyshawn cares what Auburn's basketball practice court looks like?
No, but I think Jerry's point is if you're looking for finance resources financially, you're not getting that either right now. So that's the point he's making.
Part of it.
Right.
That was the other part. You're not getting that either.
You're going to get one or the other. You're not getting any. So that was his point.
Well, yeah.
So that's what they got to build on. That's what we've been saying. Basketball has it very difficult, but they're not alone in this. And I know people don't want to hear it and they cry, oh, you're making excuses. It's not an excuse. And I'm going to tell you something. And we'll get into this more in overtime because I spent a lot of time with baseball, with Kansas baseball. There are things that even Kansas baseball has that UCF does not have that blew my mind. I'm telling you, man, we are behind, Trace. And it's I'm not pointing any fingers. It's just that's what happens when you're going to mid-major to a power conference. It's a different ballgame.
Well, March Madness gives way to an April championship game, Elo, down to the wire, and Houston falls just short, loses to the Florida Gators up in Gainesville there, the Gators winners. What did you make of the game? It was certainly exciting. I knew when Houston had a big lead, as did Texas Tech most recently a week or so ago, that they needed to watch out for the Gators.
Yeah, I did not like the officiating. It's just what bothers me about college basketball. As soon as Todd Golden cried and whined like a baby, he got teed up. Every whistle went Florida's way from the rest of the game there. Houston's offense got stagnant a little bit. And, just kind of
expect better on that last play, though, right? They
way better. And I'm not saying this because you are a fan of the Cubs, but the Houston Basketball Pro, this is their 7th Final Four. They've yet to win the national title. They remind me a lot about the Cubs pre-2016, Trace, where you wonder, is it ever going to happen for them? Are they ever going to get over the hump and win the national title? This one's going to stink for a while for Kelvin Sampson in Houston. This was a great opportunity, but on the other hand, they were fortunate to be here because Duke collapsed on Saturday. So a wild 48 hours for Houston, but I hated the fact that Florida and the coach who had a lot of allegations that somehow got under the rug now as a national champion, and the college basketball media just looked the other way. But, that's life.
Do you think Sampson might have considered a retirement with a victory?
I think that would have been under the table, right, with his son taking over. I think that could have been on the table, but now I think you're going to move on. And they'll have a good team again next year, but boy, you don't know how many.
As long as everybody's back, they certainly will.
Correct. Correct. Now, last week, I abruptly was not on this program, ladies and gentlemen. So I called to duty to call some college baseball with UCF. Called 4 games. UCF got Stetson, and it started off with a win. And then Kansas, things didn't go as planned. Kansas swept UCF over the weekend. Knights 3-9 in Big 12 action now. Oof, took a beating. This Kansas team, by the way, ranked in the top 25 in all the polls, rightfully so. But Trace, struggles continue for UCF baseball.
Yeah, the pitching's just not there, Elo, right? 3-9. They got swept at Cincinnati a week earlier, swept at home to Kansas. I hate to tell you, they're on the road at another top 25 ranked team in Kansas State. That could be a long weekend in Manhattan, Kansas. There are a portion of this fan base that go, how do you lose to a school from Kansas? Kansas was pretty solid, Elo. Starting pitching, and they bashed the ball. They hit a lot of home runs.
Number 1 team in the country at home runs. They hit 10 home runs over the weekend. Number 1 in the Big 12. They have a top 10 MLB prospect for 2026 MLB draft in Dominic Vegley, who was fantastic for them on Friday night. Cooper Moore, good starter. UCF just doesn't have the arms right now, Trace. They need guys to get deep into games, 6 innings at least. Their bullpen is suspect. It's got issues there. And their ERA in Big 12 conference games, Trace, 7.5. Not going to get it done at this league level. I think their offense is still good enough in their defense, but starting pitching, Dominic Stagliano is not at the level he was last year. They're struggling to find some answers there.
Yeah, and sport after sport, Elo, and no doubt this will remain a topic for us and around the kingdom and overtime over the next several weeks. But sport by sport, this transition to the Big 12 has been a lot rockier than UCF fans were hopeful of, anticipating. And baseball thus far, as they approach the halfway mark in Big 12 play, going to take a lot to turn things around and get to where they were last year, which was about 500 in the league.
Why didn't we expect a struggle, though, Trace, when it was considered a top 3 league in a majority of these sports, where you're going from a league that was 6 at best, maybe a little bit worse, to a top 3, yet we're surprised that we're in a struggle adjusting? It's interesting to me.
It is an interesting conversation. Portal impact. We talk a lot about it in football, men's basketball. You see it, of course, in all the sports and baseball as well. You watched all those innings against Kansas. What do you think of the portal and how it may benefit or hurt the product that we see on the field, especially in college baseball?
Trace, I got to be honest with you, as a guy who's obviously been a softball guy and still am, I kind of fell in love with college baseball again, which sounds weird.
Really?
I thought the Saturday night Kansas game was fantastic. It was exciting. The atmosphere was great. You had fantastic athletes making defensive plays like never before.
Defensively, Kansas, so good defensively.
Incredible. And I think that the product overall, I watched Arizona State on ESPN2 Sunday night. I think the product's better overall because the portal helps the product because there's more options to pick from. Kansas, for example, has a ton of players that played in the JUCO level that they've been able to develop, including they also got a guy in the portal in Brady Council, who's Craig Council's son, who's probably going to get drafted in the MLB draft. Even UCF with Adion Espinal came out of Chipola. These teams are much stacked roster talent-wise than they were 10, 20 years ago where you maybe had to depend on freshmen.
Interesting, Elo. You fallen in love with baseball. Yeah, that'll change, though. Softball will return home at some point. You'll be back in front of the mic.
Yeah, that's true. It might not last too longer. UCF getting ready to head out west to Provo against BYU after splitting a round-robin tournament in Oklahoma, beating St. Thomas 8-4, then losing to Oklahoma. The second game against Oklahoma got washed out. Big shock. Weather bad in Oklahoma. Who knew? UCF sits now in the 37 in the RPI with a big series at BYU's. We're number 45 in the RPI, Trace.
Win series, right, Elo?
Gotcha.
You got to win series, and I hope that they don't rue dropping those 3 games a couple weeks back to Iowa State, which is below them in the RPI. That was a home series. The Bats just could not get anything going. I know you were tied up with baseball a lot. Do you take anything from an abbreviated schedule in Oklahoma that you can carry on? BYU is a tough road trip. Baseball managed to get out of there. Their only series win so far in conference play. Softball needs to duplicate that effort on the road.
I do, in that Oklahoma didn't just have their way with them. So I think the pitching is still there. Beth Damon hit 2 home runs in the St. Thomas game. She's got 6 home runs. She's the 5th UCF freshman ever to reach 6 home runs. So I think I'm encouraged about that, but you are 1,000% right. You've got to win series because after BYU, you're hosting Oklahoma State in a marquee series this weekend.
And that's a hard one to win the series.
Exactly.
Home more.
100%. Right. So that's going to determine your future. Right now, you still can make the NCAA tournament, but you got to win this series against BYU. You got Oklahoma State coming up. You still got to go to Kansas. I mean, you've got to win some games. The path is there to make the tournament, but you got to win series, like you said.
All right, Elo, prop time. We managed to carry on without you. You're so good at coming up with them. We asked about uniforms. Christian Simmons.
Gee, wonder who came up with that.
I threw it on him right there at the last moment. He thought black jerseys. I said white because I didn't think UCF packed more than one kit, and then they wore back-to-back the same uniform. And I think maybe they got them overnighted because they needed them for Saturday, but I kid. What do you got?
All right. It's only fitting. Scrimmage open Friday night. Trace, you're going to be there, right?
I do plan that, yes.
Which quarterback will throw more touchdowns in that scrimmage?
Taven Jackson, the leader, of course. Oh, sorry.
Whoa!
I'm not hedging any, favorites there. But I don't know, Elo. I'll just go take it.
Give me a number. How many touchdowns?
3.
Ooh, 3 touchdowns. That's pretty gutsy. I'm going to go under 3 touchdowns, but I'm going to say Dylan Risk leads the way.
Yeah, a little rebound from Risk, who threw a couple of picks in that first one, Eli. All right, time to bring back in Adam. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? Educate us, please, sir.
All right, first off, do you guys think Mike Norvell actually has a resume? Elo asked him to keep his resume updated. I'd love to see Mike Norvell's resume.
His LinkedIn profile.
I'm going to see what we got there. You talked about the House settlement. The judge has a hang up on roster limits, as you mentioned, Trace, and has asked both sides to go back and, quote, fix this. Has given them 1 week to do so. Elo, you are actually spot on in your Darius Johnson. No tournament postseason his freshman year. Went to the NIT his sophomore and junior seasons, and obviously the Crown his senior season. You guys are talking about facilities and Keyshawn Hall. He famously, according to Twitter, took a lot of his meetings via Zoom. So I don't think he saw anybody's facilities. I think he only saw somebody's bank account. You guys talked about Houston. Right now, ESPN on their way too early poll has Houston ranked number 1 for next season already.
Thank you, Adam. One more thing before we go. UCF football head coach Scott Frost and family donating $500,000 to the newly launched Competitive Success Fund in advance of UCF's Day of Giving this Thursday, April 10th. Look for new episodes midweek every week on the Sons of UCF YouTube channel and on the Sons podcast feed, where you'll also find Around the Kingdom Overtime. For Adam Eaton, Eric Lopez, I'm Trace Trylko. Thanks, everyone, for being with us for this week's Around the Kingdom.